If you've ever wondered how badly things can go wrong in the vacuum of space, strap in, kiddo. You're about to find out. The Aurora's Echo wasn't exactly known for its stellar reputation or even its stellar condition, for that matter. It was the kind of ship that looked like it had been cobbled together by someone who thought duct tape was a legitimate form of engineering. But hey, it had a charm, like a broken toaster that still makes surprisingly good toast. Captain Jax Harrow, a man who wore his cynicism like a well-tailored suit, stood in the command center, which was really just a slightly larger closet with too many buttons and not enough space to stretch. "All right, crew, listen up," he barked, his voice as gruff as a sandpaper sandwich. "We've got a routine supply run, and by routine I mean probably not routine at all. So if you were looking forward to the cosmic equivalent of a Sunday drive, well, tough luck." The crew, a motley bunch of misfits, rolled their eyes collectively. There was Dex, the ship's engineer, whose belief in the power of optimism was only rivaled by his ability to ignore reality. "Maybe this time it'll be smooth sailing," he offered, soldering a wire that seemed to be in a perpetual state of rebellion. "Dex, if I wanted optimism, I'd watch a rom-com," Jax replied dryly, adjusting his cap with the logo barely visible under layers of space grime. "Captain, we've got incoming," piped up Lena, the ship's navigator, who had the uncanny ability to turn any sentence into an existential crisis. She squinted at her screen, which flickered like it was auditioning for a horror movie. "Looks like company." "Define company," Jax said, a hint of annoyance creeping into his voice. "Hostile company, sir," Lena responded, her tone suggesting she'd rather be anywhere else but here, like maybe on a beach planet where the sand didn't try to kill you. The ship shuddered slightly, a sensation they all knew too well. Aurora's Echo had a tendency to groan under pressure, much like its captain. "Brace yourselves," Jax muttered, more out of habit than necessity. On the view screen, a K-Tal ship loomed into view, its sleek design a stark contrast to the rust bucket they called home. "Well, isn't that just the cherry on top of this disaster Sunday?" Jax said as he glared at the alien ship, which seemed to be taunting them with its mere existence. The comms crackled to life with a voice that sounded like a blender full of rocks. "Human vessel, this is the K-Tal. Surrender or be destroyed." Jax considered the ultimatum for all of 3 seconds. "You know, I'm not really fond of either option," he replied, somehow managing to put a sarcastic spin on what should have been a desperate situation. "Can we pick a third?" The voice on the other end didn't seem amused. "You have 10 seconds to comply." "I'd like to comply you right up your," Dex started, but Jax cut him off with a wave of his hand. "All right, folks, looks like we're in for a fight," Jax said, his voice taking on a tone that suggested he actually relished the idea. "Dex, get the shields up. Lena, plot an escape route. And for the love of all that's unholy, someone grab the damn weapons manual and pretend we know what we're doing." The crew sprang into action, or at least a reasonable facsimile of it. Dex fiddled with the shield controls like he was trying to solve a particularly difficult crossword puzzle. "Shields up, Captain," he announced as the familiar hum of the ship's defenses kicked in. Lena, meanwhile, was furiously tapping at her console, muttering curses in multiple languages as she tried to outsmart a missile guidance system. "We're not gonna outrun them, but I can buy us some time," she said, her eyes never leaving the screen. "Time's about all we've got going for us," Jax said, settling into his chair, which protested under his weight with a creak that suggested it was one bad day away from snapping like a twig. "All right, let's see if we can't turn this into a learning experience for our alien friends." The K-Tal ship fired the first shot, a bolt of energy that zipped past Aurora's Echo with the staggering precision of a drunk fly. "Missed us by a hair, Captain," Lena commented, her voice betraying a slight tremor. "Guess they're targeting systems on the fritz," Dex chuckled as he flipped switches with the dexterity of a concert pianist. "Or they're just toying with us," Lena shot back. "Now that's the spirit, Lena," Jax said with a smirk. Never let a little thing like imminent death dampen your mood. The ship shuddered again, this time from a direct hit. Shields holding for now, Dex reported, though the sweat beading on his forehead suggested it might not be for long. Let's give him a taste of their own medicine, Jax ordered, and the crew shared a glance that was equal parts determined and terrified. The weapons system, a relic from an era when people thought mixing gunpowder and space travel was a great idea, whirred to life with an ominous clunk. Firing in 3, 2, 1, Dex called out, pressing the button with all the enthusiasm of someone defusing a bomb. The ship's cannons spat fire into the void, each shot a tiny defiance against the vastness of space and the very real threat of annihilation. Direct hit, Lena shouted, a rare smile breaking through her typically dour demeanor. Looks like we can still surprise him, Jax said, a note of pride in his voice. The K-Tal ship wobbled slightly as if reconsidering its life choices, but it wasn't backing down. More shots were fired, lightning across the starry sea. Keep it up, folks, Jax encouraged, the adrenaline of the fight giving him a rare burst of optimism. We're not dead yet. As the battle raged on, the Aurora's Echo held its own, an underdog in a fight that shouldn't have been possible. But then again, impossible was just another challenge for Jax and his crew. Captain, more ships incoming, Lena reported, her earlier smile now a distant memory. Jax sighed, the weight of the universe pressing down on him. Well, nobody said it was gonna be easy. Let's show these K-Tal what humans are made of. The odds were against them, but that had never stopped them before. The Aurora's Echo might have been a relic, but it was their relic, and they'd be damned if they'd let anyone take it from them without one hell of a fight. The Aurora's Echo, creaking under the strain of the K-Tal assault, was a testament, I said it, to human stubbornness. To Jax, it was like piloting a tin can through a hailstorm, and the hail had a bad attitude. The K-Tal ships didn't bother with subtlety. They surrounded the Echo like bullies in a schoolyard, missiles locked and ready to teach a lesson in humility. Now, ain't this a fine mess, Jax muttered, rubbing his temples as if that would magically conjure up a solution. It didn't. Lena let out a low whistle, her eyes glued to her flickering screen. They're coming in close, Captain. Brace for impact, she said, with the enthusiasm of someone announcing a tax audit. You know, I always wanted to meet aliens, Dex chipped in, not looking up from the console that was as temperamental as a cat with a vendetta. Just thought it'd be more of a handshake, less of a gunpoint. Suddenly, the ship shuddered violently, throwing Lena against her seatbelt, the metal biting into her shoulder. She grimaced but tried to keep her focus. Hold on to your lunch, folks, Jax grumbled, as the ship's lights flickered ominously, giving the whole place the ambience of a horror movie shot on a budget. Looks like they're boarding. No sooner had the words left his mouth than the Echo's airlock hissed and clanged like a bad cover band, warming up for a concert nobody wanted to attend. The K-Tal didn't bother with pleasantries or ringing the doorbell. They just barged in, all scales and ominous armor, like they were auditioning for a sci-fi remake of The Terminator. Astra Voss, the ship's unofficial diplomat and master of the poker face, stepped forward. Her calm demeanor suggested she was either exceptionally brave or had completely lost her marbles. Greetings, esteemed K-Tal, she said, her voice smooth as recycled whiskey. To what do we owe the honor of your visit? The lead K-Tal, a hulking figure with a face like a melted candle, strutted forward, his eyes glowing with what looked suspiciously like disdain. Humans, he rasped, voice like nails on a chalkboard. You are said to possess divine abilities. Jax snorted, unable to help himself. Divine. Buddy, we're just trying to keep the lights on. Astra shot Jax a glare that could have frozen the sun. What he means is, we are honored by your belief in our prowess, she said, choosing her words as if they were live grenades. Perhaps you could explain what you mean by divine. The K-Tal leader seemed to consider this, or maybe he was just trying to remember if he'd left the oven on. Our lore tells of human gods who wield great power, he declared, spreading his arms as if expecting applause. Gods, huh? Dex muttered under his breath, fiddling nervously with an exposed wire. Someone's been reading the wrong brochures. Astra kept her cool, flashing a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. As flattered as we are, I assure you, we're just simple space travelers, she said, with the practiced patience of someone who's tried reasoning with a malfunctioning AI. Your modesty is noted, the KTAL leader replied, his tone suggesting he wasn't buying it for a second. But modest gods are still gods. Jax leaned back in his chair, arms crossed. Sounds like someone's got a case of the messiahs, he said, earning him another withering look from Astra. We must test your divinity, the KTAL declared, looking entirely too eager for Jax's liking. Prove your worth and we shall let you go. This was quickly spiraling into the kind of situation Jax had nightmares about, usually involving unpaid debts and angry loan sharks. Test. What kind of test? He asked, already dreading the answer. The KTAL leader gestured to his cronies, who stepped forward with what appeared to be a glorified Rubik's Cube. Not just any cube, though, this one buzzed with an energy that made Jax's teeth itch. Complete the puzzle, the KTAL said, as if it were the simplest thing in the universe. Dex took one look at the cube and sighed. Great, a cosmic Rubik's Cube. Exactly what I wanted today. We'll need a moment, Astra said, shooting a calculated smile at their uninvited guests. It's been a while since we've exercised our, divine powers. Jax took that as his cue to huddle with the crew, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper. All right, folks, ideas. Lena shrugged, her usual existential gloom tempered by the absurdity of their predicament. We could just confess we're really bad at puzzles. Not helping, Lena, Jax snapped, though he couldn't entirely suppress a grin. Dex, you got anything? Dex looked at the cube like it had personally insulted him. Well, if we solve it, maybe they'll let us go. Or maybe it's rigged to blow us to bits if we fail. You really know how to lighten a mood, Dex, Jax quipped before looking at Astra. Any thoughts, negotiator? We need to stall, Astra said, eyes darting between the crew and their scaly captors. If we keep them busy long enough, maybe we can figure out a way to take back control of the ship. Jax nodded, appreciating the glimmer of hope in Astra's plan. All right. Let's stretch this out and see if we can get a better grip on the situation. Returning to the KTAL, Astra put on her best diplomatic smile, which was the facial equivalent of a used car salesman's pitch. We accept your test, but it requires immense concentration. Our human brains, you see, are delicate instruments. The KTAL leader regarded her with a look that suggested he might have been dropped on his head as a hatchling. Then begin, he commanded, gesturing to the cube with all the ceremony of a judge condemning someone to clean latrines. Dex took the cube gingerly, as if it might explode if he sneezed on it wrong. He began twisting and turning it, muttering to himself like a man trying to remember if he left the stove on. Meanwhile, Jax was busy plotting. Lena, what's our status on the ship's systems? He whispered, doing his best to look inconspicuous. Which, given the circumstances, was like wearing a neon sign that read up to no good. Lena was already busy tapping into the ship systems via her wrist console, her fingers dancing over the keys with practiced ease. We've still got some control. I might be able to reroute power to the engines if we can get a clear shot, she whispered back, her voice barely audible over the KTAL's guttural conversations. Jax nodded, feeling a spark of hope despite the odds. Good. Keep at it. We might need to make a run for it if this goes south. Astra continued to distract the KTAL with tales of human ingenuity, weaving a tapestry of nonsense that was as convincing as it was ridiculous. And of course, we can't forget the time one of our kind single-handedly defeated a rogue AI using nothing but a toaster and a roll of duct tape, she said, her voice dripping with barely contained sarcasm. The KTAL listened, rapt, their expressions suggesting they were buying Astra's tall tales wholesale. You humans are truly remarkable, the leader murmured, all mingling with suspicion in his eyes. Perhaps we underestimated you. You wouldn't be the first, Jax said with a smirk, unable to resist the jab. Meanwhile, Dex was still fiddling with the puzzle cube, which seemed to be getting more complicated the more he turned it. "I swear this thing's alive," he muttered, trying not to look too frustrated. "Keep at it," Lena whispered, glancing nervously at the K-Tau. "They're buying us time, but we won't have forever." As minutes ticked by, tension built in the air like a storm cloud about to burst. The K-Tau watched with increasing impatience, their earlier curiosity giving way to irritation. "Time is running out," the leader warned, his voice like a death knell. "Prove your divinity or face the consequences." Jax knew they were running out of options. They needed a miracle, or at least something close enough to fool the K-Tau into thinking they were divine. "All right, listen up," Jax whispered urgently. "Lena, can you give us a little push? Something subtle but convincing." Lena nodded, her fingers flying over her console. "I can create a small energy surge. It might make the cube light up, give them the show they're looking for." "Do it," Jax ordered, crossing his fingers like a superstitious gambler at a roulette table. As Lena worked, Dex kept twisting the cube, each motion deliberate and measured. And then, just as the K-Tau leader was about to lose his patience, the cube began to glow with an ethereal light, the colors shifting and pulsing like a miniature star going supernova. The K-Tau gasped, their eyes wide with astonishment. "It is true," the leader exclaimed, his voice tinged with awe. "The humans are divine." Jax couldn't believe their luck. Somehow, they'd managed to bluff their way out of another tight spot. He exchanged a quick, triumphant glance with Astra, who looked equally relieved. "See, told you," Jax said, unable to resist rubbing it in just a little. "Now, if you don't mind, we'd like our ship back." The K-Tau, sufficiently impressed, or perhaps just eager to avoid angering beings they now believed to be gods, nodded and began to retreat, their earlier aggression replaced by reverence. As the K-Tau disappeared into the airlock, Jax let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. "Well, that went better than expected," he admitted, a rare grin spreading across his face. "Damn right," Dex said, finally setting the cube down with a sigh of relief. "Never thought I'd be so happy to see the back of those scaly bastards." Astra shook her head, her composure finally cracking as she let out a shaky laugh. "I can't believe they bought it. People will believe anything if you sell it right," Jax replied, clapping her on the back. "Good work, everyone. Now let's get the hell out of here before they change their minds." As Lena plotted a course away from the K-Tau ships, the Aurora's echo rumbled to life, the hum of the engines a welcome sound in the silence that followed the K-Tau's departure. Jax settled back into his chair, feeling the tension slowly drain from his bones. "Just another day in the life," he mused, the cynicism in his voice tempered by a hint of pride. "Yeah, and what a life it is," Lena remarked, her voice light despite the chaos they'd just endured. "Here's to surviving another round." "Survival's our middle name," Dex added with a grin, tapping a few keys to stabilize the ship systems. "Let's just hope our luck holds out a little longer." As the Aurora's echo slipped away from the K-Tau ships, Jax couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. Sure, they'd bluffed and scrambled their way to safety, but they'd done it together, proving once again that humans were nothing if not resourceful. And as the stars streaked past the view screen, Jax knew one thing for certain. Whatever the universe threw at them next, they'd face it head-on, with a grin and a sarcastic quip at the ready. Because when you lived on the edge of disaster every day, you learned to laugh in the face of danger, and maybe, just maybe, cheat death one more time. The Aurora's echo wasn't what you'd call a sleek vessel. More like a space jalopy with a personality disorder. But Jax Harrow felt a weird kind of affection for it, like the way you might love an ugly pet. It had quirks, charm, and a tendency to shudder like it was on the verge of a nervous breakdown. Today, though, the shuddering felt justified. They just hoodwinked a bunch of K-Tau zealots, and the high from surviving was already wearing off like a cheap buzz. "They bought it," Dex marveled, shaking his head as if trying to dislodge the disbelief. "Can't believe they thought we're divine." "Curiosity of the universe," Jax replied, grinning as he leaned back in his worn captain's chair, which creaked in protest. People are suckers for a good fairy tale, especially when it saves their scaly asses from non-existent wrath. Lena snorted, her eyes glued to the flickering console. Next thing, we'll be starting our own intergalactic cult. The Church of the Big Khan. That's got a ring to it, Jax mused, tapping his chin thoughtfully. All we need is a catchy slogan and a couple of confused converts. As the Aurora's echo sped through space, leaving the K-Tal in the metaphoric dust, Astra Voss was busy in the background with her usual diplomatic finesse, which involved a lot of eye-rolling and sarcastic commentary delivered with the poise of a bored aristocrat. She was already drafting up some post-encounter analysis mumbo-jumbo for when they inevitably had to explain this escapade to some higher-ups. Assuming they survived that long, of course. Jax looked over at Astra, who was now smiling with the smug satisfaction of someone who just sold ice to a space penguin. So what do you make of our scaly friends? Religious zealots with an inferiority complex, Astra replied, her voice dry as a desert but smoother. They need a spiritual leader, someone to guide them out of the cosmic gutter. Lucky for us, they've got the IQ of a turnip when it comes to spiritual discernment. Turnips? Dex asked, eyebrow raised. That's generous. Let's just say they missed a few classes on critical thinking skills, Astra said, crossing her arms. But they're desperate and we can exploit that. Jax perked up at the word exploit. You thinking what I'm thinking? If it involves leveraging their beliefs for our benefit, then yes, Astra said, her smile wickedly conspiratorial. I'm confused, Lena interjected, looking away from her screens. Are we seriously going to play along with this Messiah business? Why not? Jax shrugged, casually dismissing the ethics of it all like swatting a fly. It beats getting roasted by laser cannons or whatever else they've got stashed on their ships, so we lie our way through the galaxy. Dex asked, clearly warming to the idea. I can get behind that. Nothing new there, Jax said, grinning at the crew. Just with a fancier title now. Captain Messiah Harrow, Lena scoffed. Has a nice ring to it. I bet it does, Jax said, adopting a mock thoughtful look. And the best part, we make the rules. Divine inspiration and all that. Astra was already strategizing, her mind a whirlwind of possibilities. If we play this right, we could turn the K-Tal's own beliefs against them, get them to do our bidding. They're looking for a savior, after all. Conveniently stupid of them, Lena said, but her skeptical tone carried a hint of admiration. And they think we're divine because we made a cube glow, ritualistic brains. What can you do? Dex said, shaking his head. To be fair, though, it was a pretty neat light show. Jax knew they were onto something. He could almost taste the potential power, the freedom from the constant threat of being hunted or blown to atoms. If they played their cards right, they might just carve out a niche for themselves in this chaotic universe. All right, team, let's polish off our halos, Jax said, rubbing his hands together with glee. We've got a new role to play, and a galaxy of fools to fool. The rest of the crew laughed, their initial tension dissolving into a giddy sense of mischief. It was a rare moment of levity in their grim existence, a chance to thumb their noses at fate while securing a future that didn't involve being blasted to bits. As the Aurora's echo cruised through the void, Jax felt a rare sense of optimism. Sure, they were about to scam an entire species out of their spiritual fervor, but what the hell? In a universe as unforgiving as this, a little divine intervention felt just about right. Hours later, as talk turned to logistics, Jax found himself in the galley with Dex and Lena, poring over a map of K-Tal space. It was cluttered with notes and markings, a testament to their new mission, turning mythology into opportunity. So, what do we actually know about these K-Tal beliefs? Lena asked, squinting at the tangled diagram. I mean, besides their tendency to drool over glowing cubes, Dex shrugged, flipping through a digital compendium of known alien cultures. Not much, honestly. They've got some prophecy about a leader coming from the stars, guiding them to glory or some nonsense. Sounds like we just have to wave our hands, speak in riddles, and occasionally make something glow, Jax said, tapping a finger on the map. Shouldn't be too hard, right? Lena laughed, a dry, brittle sound. Easier said than done. But it's our best shot, and if it all goes to hell, Dex asked, his usual cynicism peeking through his facade of bravado. Then we improvise, Jax said, leaning back against the galley wall. We've gotten out of worse scrapes, haven't we? Barely, Lena muttered, her voice lilting with a mix of humor and resignation. Barely still alive, Jax retorted, a wry smile on his lips. And that's all that matters. While they hashed out the details, Astra was working her own brand of magic, contacting some old connections, digging up whatever dirt she could find on the K'Tal's political situation. It was a long shot, but if anyone could turn up useful intel in a pinch, it was Astra. She had a knack for ferreting out secrets, and she'd be damned if she let a little thing like a language barrier stop her. Back on the bridge, Jax watched as the stars zipped by, each one a distant dream of safety and security. He mused on their situation, pondering the absurdity of it all. Here they were, a ragtag band of misfits and con artists, about to take the universe's biggest leap of faith into the realm of religion. And all because some lizard-faced zealots had a penchant for glowing objects and a taste for divine intervention. Would you look at that, Jax said, gesturing to the cosmos. A galaxy full of idiots, and we're about to be their favorite ones. Dex chuckled, shaking his head in disbelief. Yeah, but they are our idiots now. Here's to our glorious future as cosmic charlatans, Lena added, raising an imaginary glass. As they toasted to their ridiculous new venture, the Aurora's echo continued its journey, a bullet-shaped speck hurtling through the endless night. Jax couldn't help but feel a surge of pride for his crew, their audacity, their resilience, their unwavering ability to laugh in the face of absurdity. They might not be divine, but they were damn good at pretending. And in a universe that thrived on lies and deception, that was all they needed. The Aurora's echo continued its unlikely voyage, with the crew basking in their recent success, hoping they might just ride this wave of divine misunderstanding all the way to a cushy future. Of course, the universe had a way of reminding you just how much it hated you when things started to look bright. And right on cue, a message crackled through on Jax's comms, bearing the unmistakable undertones of K'Tal entitlement. "Greetings, Divine Harbinger," said the K'Tal emissary, Enkari, Jax thought, though all their names sounded like someone gargling gravel. "The Council of the Stars seeks guidance. They require specifics for the next phase of our glorious ascension." Jax mouthed glorious ascension and rolled his eyes. Specifics, huh? He scratched his chin thoughtfully, wishing he had more than just a sketchy understanding of these lizards' theology. "Our divine plan unfolds like a star itself, Enkari. Brighter yet mysterious," he said, hoping that sounded suitably prophetic. "What exactly are they looking for?" "The Council seeks your divine insight on the construction of the Beacon of Purity," Enkari droned, his voice rich with reverence. "To light the path for the chosen." Dex, who had been eavesdropping for his daily dose of absurdity, couldn't resist chiming in. "What in the void is a beacon of purity?" "Sounds like they want us to build a giant flashlight. Maybe they need mood lighting for their religious raves," Lena quipped, peering over a console filled with blinking lights that never seemed to blink in a reassuring pattern. Jax muted the comm, turning to his crew. "All right, ideas. Anyone know how to build a religious flashlight?" Astra leaned back in her chair, arms crossed. "If it's anything like their other requests, I'm guessing they just need something shiny that doesn't explode immediately. Shouldn't be too hard," Dex said, pulling up schematics of the K'Tal ships. "Their tech is primitive. We might have a few spare parts lying around that could do the trick." Enter Lyra Quell, the ship's engineer and resident miracle worker. She approached with a glint in her eye, the kind that suggested an idea so crazy it just might work, or at least provide a good show. "I could rig something that'll look impressive enough. Maybe add a few bells and whistles," Jax chuckled. "Bells and whistles, huh? Just make sure it doesn't blow up in our faces." "No promises," Lyra replied, a grin spreading across her face. "I'll see what I can cobble together. If we're lucky, it'll blind them with its brilliance before they notice it's a heap of scrap." "Sounds perfect," Jax said. "And while you're at it, see if you can work in a little surprise. Something to, level the playing field." Lyra nodded, already deep in thought. "I'll see what I can do. Might be able to rig a delay in their power systems. Nothing too obvious, but just enough." Meanwhile, Astra was busy sweet-talking the K'tal emissary, spinning a yarn about cosmic harmony and divine enlightenment. She had a way of making even the biggest load of crap sound like poetry, and the K'tal were eating it up like a starving man at a buffet. Dex leaned over to Jax. "I don't know how she does it." "I'd have blown our cover 3 sentences in." Jax smirked. "That's why she's the diplomat, and you're the guy who presses buttons." As Lyra set to work on her makeshift beacon, the rest of the crew focused on maintaining the illusion. The K'tal were demanding, sure, but they were also incredibly easy to manipulate. It was almost like playing with puppies, very dangerous, laser-toting puppies, who just happened to think you were a god. Lyra finally emerged from the bowels of the ship with something that looked like it had been cobbled together by a very determined raccoon. It was all wires and panels, with a shiny bulb perched precariously on top. "Behold, the beacon of purity," she announced, sarcasm dripping from her voice. "Looks like a junkyard threw up," Dex said, inspecting it with a skeptical eye. "Hey, don't knock it," Lyra retorted. "This baby's got enough power to light up a small moon, and I've added a little something extra just in case." "Extra, huh?" Jax said, arching an eyebrow. "Care to elaborate?" "Let's just say they'll be seeing stars if they try anything funny," Lyra replied with a wink. With the beacon of purity, Jax snorted every time he thought about it. Ready for presentation, Astra contacted the K'tal, her voice dripping with false sincerity. "We have prepared a token of divine purity. May it guide you to the salvation you seek." The K'tal emissary's response was immediate and reverent. "We are honored, divine ones. The council awaits your presence to witness the illumination." Jax gave a mock salute. "Looks like we're heading back into the dragon's den." "Everyone ready as we'll ever be," Lena said, though her fingers drummed nervously on the console. As they prepared for their audience with the K'tal, Jax ran through their escape plan one more time. If things went south, they had a few tricks up their sleeves, courtesy of Lyra's handiwork. It wasn't perfect, but it was all they had. The K'tal ship loomed before them, a massive, angular construct that looked like someone had tried to build a cathedral out of metal and bad dreams. They docked with only a minor shudder, which was about as smooth as it got for the Aurora's Echo. As they entered the K'tal ship's grand hall, the crew was greeted by rows of K'tal zealots, all decked out in ceremonial garb that somehow managed to look both regal and absurd. The council sat at the far end, their expressions inscrutable, or maybe just incapable of expression. It was hard to tell with all those scales. Astra took the lead, carrying the beacon as if it were a sacred relic. The K'tal watched in awe, their eyes practically glowing with anticipation. Jax tried not to laugh. If only they knew. "Behold," Astra proclaimed, her voice echoing through the chamber. "The beacon of purity, a gift from the stars." The K'tal erupted into a chorus of hisses and clicks, which Jax chose to interpret as applause. He glanced at his crew, all of whom managed to keep straight faces by some miracle. As the council members inspected the beacon, Jax felt the familiar tension of the unknown creeping in. Would they see through the deception? Would everything implode in a spectacular fashion? He hoped not, but in this universe, hope was just another way of deluding yourself. One of the council members, a particularly large K'tal with a crest that resembled a lopsided crown, stepped forward. "We are honored," he said, his voice a strange mix of reverence and suspicion. "May this guide us to triumph." Jax nodded, playing the part of an aloof deity, all the while acutely aware of the absurdity of it all. "May it bring you clarity," he intoned, wondering if this was what he'd have to spend eternity doing, selling junk to lizards in space. As the K'tal began their ceremony, Filled with chants and strange movements, the crew eased back, trying to blend into the background. Lyra kept a close eye on the beacon, ready to trigger her little surprise if necessary. "Think they'll notice it's a hunk of junk?" Lena whispered, her voice barely audible over the din. "Not if we're lucky," Dex replied, though his grip on his blaster suggested he wasn't feeling particularly lucky. The K-Tal's ritual continued, and for the briefest of moments, Jax allowed himself to believe they might just pull this off. That was until Enkari approached, his eyes gleaming with a mix of awe and cunning. "Great ones," he said, his voice low and full of false humility. "The Council wishes to accompany you on a journey to the Great Nebula. They seek to witness your power firsthand." Jax felt his gut twist. Of course, nothing could ever be simple. "A journey, you say?" he repeated, buying time. "To the Great Nebula, indeed," Enkari replied, oblivious to the panic simmering beneath Jax's calm facade. "It is the most sacred site in our lore. Your presence would fulfill the prophecy." Lyra shot a glance at Jax, her eyes narrowing. "This was not part of the plan." "Prophecies," Jax mused, forcing a smile. "Tricky things, those. We'll need to prepare, obviously. Such a journey requires contemplation, of course," Enkari said with a deferential bow, though his gaze lingered a moment too long. As the crew retreated to the Aurora's Echo, the tension was palpable. Back in the relative safety of their ship, the facade dropped, replaced by a mix of frustration and grim humor. "Great Nebula," Lena burst, incredulous. "That's on the other side of the sector. Why do these things always get complicated?" Dex muttered, running a hand through his hair. "Because the universe has it out for us," Astra replied dryly, her diplomatic veneer cracking just a tad. Jax let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. "All right, folks, we've got a new challenge." "Suggestions, we could ghost them," Lyra suggested with a shrug. "Slip away when they're distracted. Risky," Astra pointed out. "They're expecting a show, not a disappearing act. Then we give them a show," Jax said, an idea forming in his mind. "Something so grand they won't see us slipping out." "Another miracle?" Dex asked, raising an eyebrow. "Something like that," Jax replied, leaning forward with a grin. "We'll need a distraction. Something big, flashy, and not too fatal." Lyra's eyes lit up. "I might have just the thing." "Remember that little extra I added to the beacon?" Jax nodded, feeling the familiar thrill of impending chaos. "Let's make it happen." With renewed purpose and a healthy dose of skepticism, the crew set to work. They had a lot riding on this, more than just their lives, though that was certainly a factor. If they could pull this off, they might just secure a future where they weren't constantly looking over their shoulders. As the Aurora's Echo hummed with activity, Jax felt a rare pang of optimism. Sure, the odds were stacked against them, but when weren't they? In a universe that thrived on unpredictability, having a plan, however haphazard, was a luxury. And if he'd learned anything, it was that you didn't have to be the biggest or the strongest. Just the smartest, or at least the boldest. With a little luck, they'd cheat death one more time, laughing all the way. The Aurora's Echo wasn't just shuddering anymore. It was vibrating like a nervous chihuahua. Captain Jax Harrow found this analogy both fitting and mildly insulting to chihuahuas everywhere. They'd been holding position, or trying to, as the K-Tal zealots hummed and drummed their way through yet another sacred call-and-response session. Jax supposed he couldn't blame them for wanting to see some divine fireworks, but at this point, even he was starting to wonder if he was a god, just to escape the tedium. "How's our plan be coming along?" Jax asked, glancing at Lyra. Her technical acumen was about the only thing standing between them and a very unpleasant stay with their scaly hosts. "Plan B might need a Plan C," Lyra replied, her voice muffled as she worked on a panel. "Or D, or whatever letter comes after we're screwed." "Pretty sure that's just called fucked," Dex chimed in, not bothering to look up from his console. He had one eye on the long-range sensors, the other on the blaster under the console. The K-Tal ships hadn't made any aggressive moves yet, but Dex preferred to be pessimistically prepared. "Right," Jax said. "How's our beacon holding up, Astra?" "Astra," their resident diplomat and expert in bullshit artistry, pulled her gaze from the K-Tal's ceremonial broadcast. Holding up like wet cardboard in a hurricane, but the K-Tal haven't noticed. They're too busy with their cosmic karaoke. Jax nodded, though his thoughts were elsewhere. The K-Tal were growing suspicious. He could feel it like a storm on the horizon, a creeping dread that nestled right between his shoulder blades. Enkari, the K-Tal emissary with the sly grin of a used airlock salesman, had been sniffing around more than usual. If anyone was going to see through their ruse, it'd be him. Jax made a mental note to avoid any more direct contact with the guy, or to fire him out of a torpedo tube if things went south. "Captain," Lena said, breaking into his thoughts as she joined the others, a frown etched on her face. "I just got word from the K-Tal. They want to inspect the Aurora's echo before we head to the Great Nebula." Jax's heart sank. "Of course they do," he muttered. "Because why not? The universe couldn't just let us slip away, could it?" "What's the play?" Dex asked, voice tinged with the kind of resignation that comes from knowing you're about to be very, very busy. "We need to stall them," Jax said, thinking aloud. "Buy ourselves some time." "Great," Astra said, not sounding enthused. "I'll prepare my finest bullshit speech. Let's just hope they're as gullible as they've been so far." Jax leaned back in his chair, fingers drumming against the armrest. He had an idea, but it was risky, about as risky as a drunkard playing with live grenades. "Lyra, how confident are you in your little surprise?" "As confident as a cat on a hot tin roof," she replied. "Which is to say, not very. But it's the best we've got." "Then we use it as a distraction while Astra buys us time," Jax decided. "We get the K-Tal's attention on something else and then we slip the noose. Assuming the noose doesn't get tightened first," Dex added helpfully. "Always the optimist," Jax said dryly. "All right, everyone, let's get to work. And remember, if anyone asks, we're totally the gods they're looking for." The crew dispersed, each to their own tasks, the weight of their situation pressing down like a gravity well. They were out of options, out of time, and running on luck that was looking increasingly threadbare. Astra was in peak form, spinning tales of divine providence and cosmic alignment like an interstellar bard. Her voice, soothing and authoritative, wrapped around the K-Tal emissaries, who nodded along, their suspicion momentarily sedated by the soothing balm of celestial nonsense. Meanwhile, Lyra was elbow-deep in circuitry, coaxing the last bits of their makeshift beacon into compliance. "If this thing blows up," she said to no one in particular, "I'm taking a vacation. Maybe to a nice, non-explosive planet." The beacon flickered, a soft, ominous glow that seemed to promise either salvation or catastrophe depending on your outlook. Jax watched it with the kind of wary respect reserved for unexploded ordnance. "So what's the plan if this all goes tits up?" Lena asked, appearing at Jax's side. "Run like hell," Jax replied. "And if that doesn't work, pretend to be dead. You'd be surprised how often that works." "Great, playing possum in space. Just what I signed up for," Lena said, rolling her eyes. The minutes dragged by, each one heavier than the last. Jax could feel the K-Tal's patience wearing thin like a frayed rope holding a very large weight. Any minute now they'd want more than just words and promises. They'd want proof. "Captain," a voice crackled over the comms. It was Enkari, his words coated in a veneer of politeness so thin it was practically transparent. "The council grows eager. We hope you are nearly prepared for the inspection." Jax swallowed the curse that bubbled up. "Of course, Enkari. Just putting the finishing touches on your divine experience." The line went dead, leaving Jax to stare at the walls of the Aurora's echo as if they might offer some guidance. They didn't, of course. A lesson in futility he knew all too well. "Time to make our miracle happen," Jax said, rallying the crew. "Lyra, on my mark, let's see what that beacon of yours can do." Astra finished her last speech with a flourish, earning a chorus of approving hisses from the assembled K-Tal. She slipped back to the crew, her expression one of hard-won disbelief. "I can't believe they bought that." "People will believe anything if it's wrapped in enough glitter," Dex said, sounding almost philosophical. Jax waited, tension coiling tight in his chest as he watched the K-Tal prepare for their inspection. He gave Lyra a nod. "Here goes nothing," she said, finessing a sequence on her console. The beacon sputtered, sparked, and then erupted in a blinding flash of light. The effect was immediate. The K-Tal, caught off guard, were momentarily blinded, their hisses turning to cries of confusion. "Now!" Jax barked, the crew springing into action. This was their chance, slim and desperate as it was. If they were lucky, they'd be able to slip their moorings while the K-Tal tried to figure out what had just happened. The Aurora's echo groaned in protest as they powered up, the engines sputtering to life with all the enthusiasm of a cat being asked to take a bath. But it worked, a miracle in itself, the ship systems pulling together with a last-minute burst of cooperation. Jax could almost taste freedom, tantalizingly close, and yet it seemed like the universe wasn't quite finished with them. As the K-Tal regained their bearings, their ships formed ranks, blocking any easy escape. "Plan C?" Lena asked, her voice tight. "Plan C," Jax confirmed, hands dancing over the controls. The beacon's afterglow still lingered, casting long shadows as the crew prepared for the worst. They were in the tightest of spots, with the K-Tal's suspicion turning to anger, their ceremonial airs forgotten in the face of what they perceived as betrayal. "Options are slim," Dex reported, his eyes flicking over the readouts. "They've got us locked down tight." "Then we break the lock," Jax said, his voice a mix of determination and reckless abandon. "We've got one shot at this." He leveled the ship at the weakest point in the K-Tal formation, willing Aurora's echo to hold together for a bit longer. They had to punch through, or they'd be cornered, and Jax had no intention of playing prisoner to a bunch of overzealous lizards. Lyra's surprise addition to the beacon had one last trick, an EMP burst, carefully tuned to scramble the K-Tal's sensors just long enough for them to make a break for it. It was risky, but risk was all they had left. "Hit it," Jax ordered, hoping luck hadn't entirely abandoned them. The ship trembled as the EMP discharged, a silent ripple that sent the K-Tal's systems into chaos. Jax seized the moment, pushing the engines to their limits, the ship's protests drowned out by the roar of thrusters. They barreled through the K-Tal lines, fire trailing in their wake as they clawed for the safety of open space. Behind them, the K-Tal scrambled to regain control, their ships slowly recovering from the electronic sucker punch. "Think we made them mad," Lena remarked, watching the K-Tal vessels attempt to give chase. "Good," Jax replied, a dark grin on his face. "Angry people make mistakes." As the stars stretched out before them, Jax allowed himself a moment of cautious optimism. They weren't out of the woods yet, but they'd bought themselves some breathing room, a chance to regroup and figure out their next move. "Let's not make a habit of this," Astra said, settling into her seat. "I prefer my diplomacy without explosions." "Where's the fun in that?" Dex countered, his grin matching Jax's. Jax leaned back, feeling the adrenaline begin to fade. They'd survived, barely, and while the future was uncertain, at least they had one. For now, that was enough. "All right, everyone," Jax said. "Let's see what other miracles we can pull out of thin air before the universe decides to kick us again." The crew laughed, a sound as ragged and defiant as their ship. They might be down, but they weren't out. Not yet. And in a universe that thrived on chaos, that was the best they could hope for. The Aurora's echo shuddered like a drunk trying to remember his own name, groaning under the stress of their recent escape. Jax stood at the helm, eyes flicking to the readouts with the kind of attention most people reserved for mugging victims. He knew they weren't out of danger yet, just taking a stroll through a minefield with boots made of luck and duct tape. "Well, we didn't explode," Lena said, leaning back in her chair with a sigh. "That's something." "Yeah," Dex chimed in, "though I'm not sure if that's an achievement or a failure at this point." Jax grunted. Even small victories tasted like ash when you knew the universe had it out for you. They just pulled off an escape Houdini would have admired, but it was hard to feel smug when your getaway vehicle seemed determined to fall apart. All right, Jack said, rubbing the back of his neck. Plan C didn't come with a Plan D, so we need to improvise. Astra, still riding the high of her latest performance, leaned against the console. Improvise? When has that ever gone wrong for us? Only every single day, Lyra muttered, twisting a stubborn bolt back into place on the panel in front of her. Astra shrugged, unfazed. Optimism, Lyra. It's the only thing keeping us from collectively losing our minds. Or maybe that's just the universe's way of laughing at us, Dex said. He was scrutinizing the display like a man who knew a bad omen when he saw one. The K-Tau might be regrouping. Regrouping, Jax echoed, which is just a fancy way of saying let's try and kill them in a new and exciting way. Astrat chuckled, but her eyes were serious. We need to get creative if we're going to convince them we're more trouble than we're worth. Jax nodded. He'd been turning over an idea in his head, the kind that seemed like it might just be crazy enough to work or get them all killed. Either way, it was worth a shot. Astra, how do you feel about putting on another show? She raised an eyebrow. What kind of show are we talking? I can do improv, but if you want a full-on musical, I'm gonna need a lot more caffeine. Think less Broadway, more divine intervention, Jax said, crossing his arms. The K-Tau love a good prophecy, right? Maybe it's time we gave them one. Astra tapped her chin, considering the idea. So we're talking full-blown celestial theater. Divine wrath, portentous words, the whole shebang. Exactly, Jax replied. We sell them on the idea that they are not just dealing with a bunch of scrappy humans. Make them think they're walking right into the teeth of a prophecy. We need to turn their zealotry against them. And if they don't buy it, Lena asked, always the realist, then we'll have to rely on our other great talent, Jax said. What's that? Lyra asked, still wrestling with the stubborn bolt. Running like hell. Astra clapped her hands together, eyes sparkling with mischief. All right, let's script this prophecy. We'll need to tap into their beliefs, give them something so big, so terrifying, they'd rather hightail it than risk divine retribution. Dex glanced at the screens, expression skeptical. We're betting on them being more scared of imaginary gods than angry about real insults. Bold strategy, Harrow. Desperate times, desperate measures, Jax said, shrugging. Besides, people are suckers for a good fairy tale. Lyra finally managed to secure the bolt, wiping her hands on her jumpsuit. All right, I'll whip up some visuals. Maybe a little light show to back up Astra's act. As long as it doesn't fry the systems this time, Dex said. I'm still pulling bits of fried circuits out of the panels. No promises, Lyra retorted, a small smile tugging at her lips. But I'll do my best. Jax watched as the crew fell into their roles, each one a cog in their janky, haphazard machine. He glanced at the console, hoping the universe was feeling merciful today. All right, people, let's give the K-Tau something to think about. As Astra began to draft her speech, Jax marveled at her ability to spin gold out of the dross they called their situation. She could sell sand in the desert. He was sure of it. This time, though, she was selling fear. Fear of the unknown, fear of cosmic retribution, fear of the great and terrible unknown that lurked in the spaces between stars. Their plan was as much bluff as it was bravado, but sometimes that was all you had. Jax had learned long ago that the universe didn't care how well you played the game, only that you survived to play another day. All right, let's get to it, Jax announced. Lyra, you ready with those visuals? Lyra gave a thumbs up, her station a chaotic mess of wires and jury-rigged tech. It might not be pretty, but it'll get the job done. Jax nodded, the knots in his stomach twisting tighter. Astra, you're up. Astra stood, her presence commanding despite the worn ship around her. She was a maestro conducting a symphony of fear and wonder, and her audience was a fleet of bloodthirsty zealots. Greetings, honored K-Tau, she began, her voice a blend of serenity and authority. We bring you a message from the stars, a warning of great import. In the ancient texts, it is written that those who stand against the harbingers of light will face a reckoning. Jax watched as the K-Tau ships held their positions, seemingly entranced by Astra's performance. If they were buying it, then maybe, just maybe, they had a chance. The prophecy speaks of a great light, Astrak continued, as Lyra triggered the visual sequence. Holographic flames danced through the void, casting an eerie glow that framed Astra's silhouette. A cleansing fire that will sweep the unworthy from the firmament. She's good, Dex muttered, awe sneaking into his voice like an uninvited guest. Don't let it go to your head, Dex, Jax replied, though he couldn't help but agree. Astra was in full flow now, weaving tales of divine retribution and celestial justice. The visuals enhanced her words, creating an otherworldly spectacle that even cynical Jax couldn't ignore. This was their Hail Mary, and it was terrifyingly beautiful. And so, heed this warning, noble K-Tau, Astra finished. Depart this place or face the divine retribution of the ancients. The choice is yours. Silence hung in the air, heavy as a condemned man's last meal. The K-Tau ships hovered, their hesitation almost palpable. This was it, the moment of truth. Jax held his breath, willing their bluff to hold. The K-Tau were a superstitious lot, prone to seeing omens in the flickering of stars. If Astra's performance had hit the right notes, they'd be too busy questioning their own beliefs to notice the cracks in their ruse. The comm crackled, a hesitant voice filtering through. We must consult the council, Inkari's voice said, sounding less sure than he had before. This is unexpected. Jax allowed himself a small smile. Unexpected indeed. Of course, he replied smoothly. We shall await your decision. The comm went silent, leaving the crew in a moment of stunned relief. Jax exhaled slowly, the tension ebbing away like the tide. Did we just scare off a fleet with smoke and mirrors? Lena asked, disbelief coloring her words. Astra sank back into her chair, looking both triumphant and exhausted. I think we did. Well, I'll be damned, Dex said, shaking his head. Never thought I'd see the day. Jax felt a flicker of hope, dangerous, seductive hope. If their gambit held, they might just live to fight another day. But he knew better than to celebrate too early. The universe had a way of reminding you that you weren't as clever as you thought. Don't crack open the champagne yet, Jax warned. We've bought time, not a victory. We need to stay sharp. The crew nodded, the weight of their situation still pressing heavily on their shoulders. They'd pulled off a small miracle, but they weren't out of the woods yet, not by a long shot. I'll take what I can get, Lyra said, her hands finally resting as she savored the moment. Just another day on the Aurora's echo, Dex muttered, a grin breaking through his gruff exterior. Jax watched the stars beyond the viewport, their cold light a reminder of the vastness that lay before them. They were still standing, still fighting, still scheming in the face of impossible odds. For now, that was enough. All right, Jax said, rallying his crew once more. Let's figure out our next move. The universe isn't done with us yet. As they began to plan, the crew's dynamics shifted from weary defiance to cautious optimism. They tricked the K-Tau, but they couldn't rest on their laurels, not when the stakes were so high. We'll need to keep an eye on them, Dex pointed out. Make sure they're not just retreating to regroup. Agreed, Jax said. Which means we need eyes on every angle. Lyra, ever practical, spoke up. I'll work on boosting our sensors. If they so much as sneeze, we'll know about it. Jax nodded. Good, and Astra, keep refining that prophecy, just in case they decide they want an encore. Astra smirked, her earlier exhaustion fading in the light of their success. I'll come up with something suitably terrifying. Maybe throw in some boiling seas and raining fire, Lena suggested. Just for dramatic flair. Consider it done, Astra replied. Jax turned his attention back to the viewport where the stars twinkled with unfeeling indifference. The universe might not care about their struggles, but they were still here, still fighting, still living. All right, crew, Jax said, his voice firm. Let's see if we can outsmart the universe one more time. The crew's laughter filled the Aurora's echo, a sound as defiant as it was joyful. They weren't out of the woods, but they were alive, and that was more than they dared hope for. In the vast expanse of space, the Aurora's echo sailed on, a beacon of hope and defiance in a universe that seemed determined to drown them in chaos. And as long as there were stars to navigate by, Jax and his crew would keep fighting, one scheme, one miracle and one day at a time. Jax Harrow stood at the helm of the Aurora's Echo, watching the K-Tal ships retreat with as much grace as a drunk stumbling home after the last call. The universe might be a relentless bastard, but occasionally, just occasionally, it threw you a bone. Jax was determined to gnaw on that bone like a starving dog until it was dust. "Looks like they bought it," Dex muttered, his voice filled with equal parts disbelief and relief. "I guess the K-Tal haven't seen a magic show since the Big Bang." Jax shot him a sideways glance. Couldn't have done it without Astra's Oscar-worthy performance and Lyra's fireworks. Astra gave a mock salute from her station. "Always happy to dazzle the gullible with my talents. Who knew theater class would be the thing that saves us from religious fanatics in space?" Lyra grinned, hands still tinkering with wires that seemed to sprout from the console like metallic weeds. "And here I thought my degree in applied rigging would only get me a job fixing coffee machines. Just goes to show you," Lena quipped, leaning back with a satisfied smirk. "Every useless skill has its day." Jax nodded, a rare flicker of camaraderie warming the grim reality of their situation. "Let's keep our eyes on the prize, though. The K-Tal are retreating, but they might just be catching their breath." Dex snorted. "I'd be catching my breath too if I thought the sky was about to fall on my head." "Speaking of falling," Astra said, sliding from her seat with the grace of a cat, "we might want to follow up this theatrical triumph with something more substantive." "Like what?" Jax asked, curious despite himself. Astra leaned against the bulkhead, arms crossed. "We've convinced them we're all-powerful harbingers. Why not sell them on the idea that we're interested in an alliance? A little peace, love, and mutual back-scratching could go a long way." Lena raised an eyebrow. "You think they'll go for that? I mean, we did just scare the pants off them." "Better than having them regroup and come back swinging," Dex pointed out. "Besides, everyone loves a good redemption arc. Even zealots. Plus," Lyra added, her eyes twinkling with mischief, "we might finally get some decent food out of it. I'm tired of protein paste. It's like eating the dreams of a dead man." Jax chuckled, despite the weight of the universe pressing relentlessly against his shoulders. "All right, let's see if we can sell them on interstellar diplomacy." "Astra, you're our frontwoman again." Astra straightened, an amused glint in her eye. "I'll need a minute to work up my next monologue. Maybe throw in some Shakespeare for good measure." "You do that, just don't mention Macbeth," Dex said dryly. "The last thing we need is more bad luck." With their strategy mapped out, Jax turned his attention back to the comms, opening a channel to the K-Tal fleet. "Inkari, you still with us? Or have you gone off to consult the prophetic hotline?" Inkari's voice crackled through the static, cautious but no longer steeped in hostility. "We are here, Captain Harrow, the Council deliberates. Your words have given us much to consider." "Glad to hear it," Jax replied, his tone smooth as polished steel. "Astra's got another message for you. Think of it as a follow-up performance." Astra stepped forward, her voice dripping with the kind of sincerity that could make a snake oil salesman look like a saint. "Honored K-Tal, we understand the weight of prophecy and the burden of interpreting the will of the cosmos. We, too, seek harmony and understanding among the stars." There was a pause, the kind that filled the cabin with a tension you could cut with a knife. Jax watched Astra as she skillfully turned their desperate situation into an olive branch. "Our mission is not one of conquest but of cooperation," Astra continued, her voice soothing as a lullaby. "Together we could achieve wonders. The universe is vast and full of mysteries. Why not explore them as allies?" "Allies?" Inkari echoed, the word hanging in the air like an unspoken promise. "Yes, allies," Astra confirmed. "There's strength in unity, a chance to rise together rather than fall apart." Jax could almost hear the cogs turning in Inkari's head. It was a gamble, sure, but then everything in life was a gamble. You just had to hope you were holding a better hand than the other guy. "We will consider your proposal," Inkari finally replied, a thread of interest weaving into his tone. "Take your time," Jax said. "We're not going anywhere fast." As the comms went silent, the crew exchanged glances that spoke louder than any words. They'd managed to buy themselves some breathing room once again. "Think they'll go for it?" Lena asked, her eyes flicking between the screens and her crewmates. "Doubtful," Dex said with his usual skepticism. "But if there's one thing Jax has taught us, it's how to make the impossible seem inevitable," Jax grunted, turning away from the viewport. "Compliments will get you nowhere, Dex," Lyra snickered. "Except maybe out of a sticky situation or two." "Which is exactly the point," Jax said. "We keep this up and we might just see the other side of this mess." "That's the spirit," Astra said, clapping him on the shoulder. "Now, let's see about not blowing up before dinner." Hours passed with the crew working in tandem, fine-tuning their systems and ensuring their ship wouldn't fall apart at the seams. They had no idea what the K-Tal would decide, but being prepared never hurt. "How's our little ship of horrors holding up?" Jax called out, watching Lyra solder another wayward component back in place. "Still a death trap, but a slightly more stable one," she replied, sparks flying as she worked. "I'd say we might just make it through one more miracle before imploding." "That's reassuring," Dex said dryly. "Next thing you know, we'll be running a luxury cruise line." Lyra grinned, wiping sweat from her brow. "I'll be sure to reserve you a cabana by the engine room." The comms crackled to life again, drawing everyone's attention. "Captain Harrow," Inkari's voice came through, quieter, measured. "The Council has decided. We will accept your offer of alliance." Jax blinked, the words taking a moment to settle in his mind. So the universe wasn't entirely against them today. "Glad to hear it, Inkari," he said, letting a small smile tug at his lips. "I'm sure this is the beginning of a beautiful friendship." Astra shook her head, muttering under her breath, "or the opening act of a space opera disaster." "Either way," Lena added, "it's never dull around here." The crew erupted into a mix of cheers and laughter, the gut-knotting tension finally giving way to a rare moment of triumph. They not only survived but managed to turn their most dangerous foes into potential allies. "All right, gang," Jax said, the weight on his shoulders lightening just a fraction. "Let's make sure this alliance sticks. We've got new friends to charm and, hopefully, food that doesn't taste like despair." As the crew dove into preparations for this new chapter, Jax couldn't help but feel a trickle of genuine optimism. Not the foolish, blind kind, but the sort that came with surviving by the skin of your teeth. Astra, ever the pragmatist, tossed him a bottle of something vaguely alcoholic. "Here's to not dying today." Jax accepted it, raising it in a mock toast. To not dying and maybe even living a little. They drank, laughter and the clinking of glasses filling the cabin. In the cold, indifferent vastness of space, the Aurora's Echo might not have been the most impressive ship, but today it was something more, a testament to human perseverance, cleverness, and sheer dumb luck. Jack stood, surveying his ragtag crew with something bordering on pride. They were scrappy, flawed, and irreverent, but they were his. "All right," he called out, setting the bottle down with a clunk. "Let's see what kind of trouble we can get into with our new K-Tal buddies." As they resumed their tasks, the laughter lingered, a fragile thread binding them together against the chaotic tapestry of the universe. Here, in this tiny, battered vessel, they'd found something worth fighting for, a future that was theirs for the taking, one bluff, one alliance, and one improbable victory at a time. The Aurora's Echo drifted through space, a patchwork quilt of malfunctioning systems and last-minute repairs. The crew lounged in the cramped mess hall, each absorbed in the peculiar aftermath of their unexpected transformation from space debris haulers to spiritual guides for the K-Tau. "What a twist," Lena mused, picking at her protein paste. "From nobody to cosmic messiahs." Our high school guidance counselors would be proud. Dex was slouched in his chair, feet up on the table, the quintessential portrait of nonchalance. "Yeah, and to think I was planning to lie low until something better came along. Now I'm a prophet. Guess my high ambitions finally paid off." Lyra snorted, her hands deftly weaving through a mess of wires she'd brought to dinner like some people bring knitting. "At least you got a promotion. I'm still stuck playing shipwright and chef, and trust me, I wouldn't wish this slop on my worst enemy." "Don't worry," Jack said with a wry smile. With K-Tal on our side, maybe we can upgrade to something that doesn't taste like regret. Astra, ever the performer, set her empty cup down with a flourish. Regret's got more spice. I'm looking forward to not having to act my way out of a vaporizing ray anytime soon. Not that I don't love an appreciative audience, but I could do without the death threats. Jax leaned back, a satisfied grin stretching his face like it was unused to such expressions. You know, I think we might actually survive this mess. Who knew a little improvisation could turn our worst day into a miracle? Miracle? Dex echoed, eyebrows climbing his forehead. More like a cosmic joke with us as the punchline. Hey, if we're the joke, at least we're still laughing, Lena said, clinking her cup against Dex's in a mock toast. The ship shuddered slightly, as if protesting their newfound optimism. Jax shot a glance at the ceiling as if expecting it to cave in out of spite. Not so loud. The universe might hear you and decide to remind us it's still got a bone to pick. Or 20, Lyra added, her gaze flicking to the pile of parts by her feet. Astra leaned close, lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. Think about it. We've got the K-Tal eating out of our hands. What's next? Do we ask them to join a bowling league or something? Jax chuckled, crossing his arms. Let's not get carried away. We still need to convince them this alliance is worth their while. They might be suckers for prophecy, but they are not idiots. Right, Lena said, gesturing with a spoon. We keep playing nice, and maybe they'll supply us with something other than space puffs. Let's hope their idea of hospitality involves real food, Lyra muttered, prodding her paste with a look of disdain. They sat in silence for a moment, the weight of their reality settling like dust on old furniture. The K-Tal's acceptance of their proposed alliance hadn't just been a stroke of luck, it was a ticket to survival, a breath of fresh air in the vacuum of space. Dex broke the contemplative silence, looking around the table. So, what do we do when we're not pretending to be celestial messengers? I mean, I can't keep this up forever. My acting skills peaked in the 3rd grade. Astra waved a hand dismissively. Simple. We do what we always do. Wing it like there's no tomorrow because, let's face it, there might not be. Jack sighed, ruffling a hand through his hair. Seems to be our modus operandi. But hey, it's worked this far, right? True, Lena agreed. I mean, we could be space dust right now. Instead, we're ambassadors to the stars. More like con artists with a divine touch, Lyra corrected, her grin as sharp as a laser scalpel. To the divine con, Jax said, raising a pretend glass. May we never get caught. Hear, hear, the rest of the crew chimed, laughing in the face of the absurdity that had become their lives. They spent the following hours in a flurry of activity, each member of the crew performing their own unique rites of preparation for the next phase of their unholy communion with the K-Tal. If the universe had a plan, they weren't privy to it, but that had never stopped them before. Astra commandeered the comms, rehearsing her next diplomatic performance as if she were about to step onto the grand stage of the Galactic Theater. All we need now is a catchy hook, something to keep them on the line. How about join us and receive one free miracle, Dex suggested, only half joking. Maybe not that, Astra replied, rolling her eyes. We don't want to oversell. No refunds, no exchanges, Lena added, leaning over the comms console. Limited time offer, Jax chuckled, his amusement genuine despite the ever-present threat of disaster. Let's just keep the promises we can actually deliver on, like not blowing up. That's always a good start, Lyra said, sealing a panel with a satisfied thud. And maybe we can learn a thing or two about their tech while we're at it. Could be a game changer. Inkari seems like the sharing type, Astra said, her tone dripping with irony. Jax nodded, his gaze fixed on the endless expanse of space visible through the viewport. As long as we keep them on our side, we've got a chance. A few hours of preparation later, Jax gathered the crew for a final briefing. They crowded into the bridge, an assortment of mismatched chairs and consoles barely holding together under the strain of constant patchwork. All right, he began, scanning their faces. We've made it this far, and I've got a feeling we're not done yet. We need to keep this alliance rolling, make sure the K-Tau think we're the best thing since sliced nebulae. Just our luck, Dex muttered. We've got to be the universe's weirdest interstellar diplomats. Lena smirked, arms crossed. Who better than us? We've got charm, style, and a ship that screams "fix me" louder than a rusty door. Jax continued, his voice steady. We're headed for the K-Tau home system to finalize the alliance. It's a chance to cement our position and maybe pick up some tech or supplies along the way. Astra leaned against a console, her eyes glinting with mischief. Theatrics aside, let's stick together. The universe might hate us, but we've got each other. Alwa group hug later, Lyra teased, eyes twinkling. Keep that up and I might just demote you to Chief Hug Officer, Jax threatened, his grin belying the sternness of his words. Noted, Lyra replied, mock saluting. The Aurora's echo, true to its nature, shuddered again as the engines roared to life. A symphony of clanks, groans, and beeps rose in a discordant harmony, a testament to the ship's resilience and the crew's patchwork ingenuity. As they set their course for the K-Tau home system, the crew settled into their roles, a well-oiled machine despite the odds stacked against them. They might have been an unlikely band of misfits, but they were theirs, and they wouldn't have it any other way. Dex glanced at Jax, a lopsided smile playing on his lips. Do you think we'll actually pull this off? Jax didn't hesitate, his voice firm. We've pulled off worse. And if we can keep the K-Tau on our side, I'd say we've got a fighting chance. Good enough for me, Lena said, her fingers dancing over her console as she monitored their course. The ship glided through the cosmos, an unwelcome guest in the vast banquet of stars and galaxies. Yet in this dance of celestial bodies, the Aurora's echo had found its rhythm, a beat forged in desperation and survival. Astra, eyes fixed on the stars, whispered a silent prayer to whatever gods might be listening, though she doubted they'd be any more helpful than the last time. But hope was a stubborn thing, refusing to be snuffed out even in the darkest corners of the universe. Hey, Captain, Lyra called, her voice cutting through the quiet hum of the ship. Think we'll ever get used to all this? Jax considered the question, his gaze distant. Maybe not, but that's half the fun, isn't it? Not knowing what's around the corner. Fun? Dex echoed, incredulous. I thought we were trying not to blow up. Semantics, Jax replied, shrugging. It's the thrill of the unknown, the promise of adventure, and the very real possibility of becoming stardust, Lena added, her voice dry. That too, Jax agreed, leaning back in his chair, the weight of command sitting lighter on his shoulders than it had in a long time. As the ship sailed forth, the crew allowed themselves a moment to dream of what might be, a future where they weren't just surviving but thriving. It was a fragile dream, but in the face of the universe's indifference, it was enough to keep them going. Here's to surprises, Astra said, raising her imaginary glass once more. And to not dying today. The rest joined in the toast, their voices mingling with the hum of the ship. It might not have been much, this ragtag crew on their battered ship, but it was enough. Enough to defy the odds, to rewrite the rules, and to find meaning in the chaos. As the Aurora's echo sailed towards the unknown, the crew knew they were ready for whatever the universe threw at them next. Because if there was one thing they'd learned, it was this. Against all logic and probability, they were still here. And that was a victory in itself.